Hello and welcome to a sped-up version of a Stampscapes live broadcast. This scene is featuring the covered bridge that I'm coloring here with dye-based inks to give myself a kind of a watercolory looking impression. Okay, I'm mixing the inks directly on the rubber to give it this different tone. And I'm doing this scene a little bit differently. I usually do kind of fall tones and whatnot, but I thought I would go for this little bit more whimsical, kind of violet pinkish color scheme. This scene is kind of more in the spirit of, what I would imagine like Disney animation would be, or as I mentioned in the video, something like a Lord of the Rings, Rivendell kind of inspired thing. They wouldn't have a covered bridge in that movie, but just kind of the majesty of a real vertical kind of a terrain with, I don't know, majestic mountains and a lot of mist and kind of air. And I wanted to try that out. And I also wanted to try out both of these stone bridges in one scene. I don't remember ever using them in conjunction with one another. So it's kind of a matter of figuring out a way to do them in one scene and how to transition from one bridge to the next. Okay, so after stamping out that covered bridge, I have the tops of the maple pear trees going up to that bridge. And then I use that ledge off to the side to give myself a little bit of a rock structure. Try to figure out where to stamp out that smaller bridge higher up in the distance. Now, I would normally, or I don't know if I would say normally, but I would oftentimes stamp out more distant objects in a lighter value, okay? But on this scene, I'm going to leave most of that up to the usage of white pigment ink, so I just end up stamping it in black, all right, just to make things easier for me. Not that doing it, in color, in a lighter color is hard, but it was hard for me to conceive of the, I don't know, maybe the end result of this piece. Not that I ever have a real firm kind of idea of how a scene is going to come out. Usually I just have kind of a concept, but, a lot of scenes are variations of scenes that I've done before, but sometimes, like this one, I'm kind of really winging it in terms of certain parts of this scene, at least. Okay, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to turn out. So, yeah, that's fun to do a lot of times because you end up seeing things that you haven't seen before, coming off of your, your craft desk. All right, so going up with this right here, we have that right over those distant maple pears. Now I just stamped out that tall rock, but I did stamp that one out in a very light value. And now I need to transition that bridge off in the distance somehow, so I'm going to use these clouds. I'm going to say that, this mountain is fairly high, and there's a kind of a layer of clouds in the higher elevation there, so I'm going to use the cloud cumulus here. And I'll get a cloud behind the bridge by masking off the bridge a little bit. If you get some of that cloud into the bridge, hey, all the better, okay? I just don't want a huge amount in that bridge. All right? But see, what I'm doing, what I was describing to the viewers of the live stream, is you wipe off this cloud a pretty good amount so that it's nice and soft on the edges when you stamp it out, and it's not like a hard rectangle. Alright, so you see it stamp it out like that. See how light and airy it is? And it blends in with that, pretty solid tall rock right above it. Here I'm going to stamp some more clouds behind the maple pear trees and in front of that bridge. Okay, so see how that's nice and airy because I've wiped off that part of the cloud where it's going to blend in with another image. It could be a different image like the bridge, or it could be just a different impression in that higher cloud up there, see? So I'm going to blend that right in there. No masking. You just stamp it right in there, and it should blend right in, okay? So just remember that with all sky images, just kind of wipe off the edges a pretty good amount. I'm not talking about like 1/8 of an inch, I'm talking about like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, really dab it off so that there's a nice soft transition like that, okay? And I put a couple more clouds up top there, and I've left an area open so it looks like a little opening for that light source to come into the scene. Alright, so right here we have the Distress Ink Antique Linen, which is a very light but warm tone. It's not super bright because these are supposed to look real antiqued and kind of weathered, okay? So it's a pretty good one to start off with as a foundation here. Now, what colors you use as a base coat, I mean, it does depend on, you know, your color scheme that you're going to be applying here, but the antique linen is kind of a little trick that I don't know about it's a trick because everyone did it, but like in beginning oil painting classes, you know, in art school, you often do like a little bit of a wash of some warm tone on your canvas, you know, for any painting to come. You're usually not going directly onto a white piece of canvas when you're kind of building up layers of things. You kind of, I don't know, give a base color to everything. So this is kind of that same type of process. I might end up covering up all of this antique linen with other transparent dye-based inks, but that's the key word, it's transparent, so this warm tone will affect the overall kind of appearance and feel of the piece. Okay, now what I'm doing here is I'm retaining some areas of the white of the paper, okay? So I'm kind of going in here and, I'm coloring, but I'm not coloring 100% in areas. You can see up in the clouds I've retained some of the white of the paper, and then going down there's some white areas on the maple treetops. It's kind of hard for, it might be hard for you to tell, but I don't know, because the billowy clouds kind of are the same, or a real similar texture to kind of the billowy look of those maple treetops, okay? In this case, they're not going to be maples, they're going to be some sort of pink blossoming, well, maybe not blossoming, but I don't know, a pinkish tinged tree. Maybe they are blossoms, I don't know. Spring tinge. Okay, this is a London Fog Gray, so I'm just working a little bit darker, okay? You don't have to follow these types of color patterns. I'm using the London Fog because it was very light in tone, okay? Now I'm going in to those trees, the pinkish tree areas, with a very light pink, okay? So you build things up from kind of light to dark when it comes to transparent media, okay? There's another area of those trees. Now, one of the things that I was reiterating to people over and over and over is that a scene doesn't always look, you know, in the early, middle stages, sometimes even in, you know, part of the late stages. It doesn't necessarily always look resolved. This doesn't look like a finished piece to me. In fact, it makes kind of no sense in terms of colors and values and things like that. This is one way to use these stamps too. I could have stamped out everything in black ink, okay? And then we can just go in there with some colored pencils or something like that, and you can color it in like a, you know, like a foundation, a composition to be colored in with, you know, pastels, colored pencils, etc. This is a little bit of a different way to work here. It's a way that I like working dye-based inks a lot of times if I want to go for a real deep looking saturated style of finish to a scene, okay? Colored pencils, you know, if you use them by themselves, they have their own look. Pastels have a really fantastic look to them. Some people used to use chalks a lot for scenes. But this is a way to just kind of build up tones very gradually and to have like a very rich, deep, three-dimensional type of appearance to a scene, which isn't necessarily the best way to do it or anything like that. It's one way to do it. You know, it's, you know, if people go out and, I don't know, work on landscapes, you know, they're not all oil painters. They're not all pastels. You know, there's watercolors, there's colored pencils, there's um, oil pastels, dry pastels. There's a lot of different media. So when it comes to crafting, I don't know, I find that people think in terms of getting locked into one medium a lot of times, you know, instead of thinking in terms of, you know, the world is their oyster. You know, they can use anything they want in any type of application, you know. So a lot of times people are asking me, do you have to use glossy paper? Okay, sometimes I'm working on a live stream and I'm working on a piece of matte paper and they'll ask me that. But that's because they saw a video of it, okay? And I might have been using glossy cardstock, or they might have watched 5 videos where I was using glossy cardstock, you know. So I totally get it, but you never want to kind of lock yourself into kind of just one medium, especially when it comes to anything that has to do with visual arts, okay? There's a lot of things out there for us to use, and it's not only in the crafting industry. You can go and use things in the art industry. If you wanted to use acrylics on your, you know, cards, you can do that. All right, so I went in, I added in incrementally darker colors in those areas in which those colors exist. So in those kind of billowy purple trees, it just looks like a you know, a blob of purple right now, and I know that, okay? And that's what I kept reiterating to people, you know. When people look at this, they're thinking, that doesn't look good to me. And it's not supposed to, you know. It would be nice if it did, if it looked great the entire time, but, you know, we're building up these tones like this. And again, it's just one method of using it. Okay, here's some alcohol inks. Speaking of kind of a multimedia, you know, I was just saying to people, hey, you can, you know, use other types of media. It doesn't, you don't have to be an either or type of person. You can be an and person, okay? And you're going to get a lot more mileage out of your media. You're going to be able to use and apply certain types of media in ways that are very conducive for that application. So, that being said, I'm using kind of, you know, markers like this because they can get into a much more of a targeted area, detailed area. You know, you can use them in a wide application as well. And here comes the colored pencils. You know, we can get into some very detailed areas with the colored pencils. This is like a slate gray being used on those bridges. Used it on the rock. You know, you can put a little bit of this here and there. And it's not like some big, bold move with, you know, a colored pencil. I can use it very subtly. Here's a black colored pencils, and I can add in some textures and shadows into my forms. And again, it's just a much more detailed instrument for detailed applications, okay? Here I am darkening the side of the covered bridge, giving it the bridge much more of a top-lit appearance. You can add some shadows on the roof. Maybe they're being cast by the trees, deepening some shadows on that little bit of the ledge stamp. But see that? You know, things are looking a little bit more, oh, I don't know, I guess rendered is a way you can kind of describe it. I'm going in with a light blue and adding that, you know, kind of having the light crystalline blue into the mix there. You see that little difference, that very subtle little blue on that path, okay? Putting it, some of it up on the rooftop. That's a little trick you can do. Having a really pale blue, not really a navy blue, but kind of a lighter, I don't know, like a sky blue or warm kind of a, yeah, warm kind of sky blue. If you add that into areas within your card, it doesn't matter what color scheme you're working in or temperature scheme, but it can make things look a little bit more full with the utilization of that. All right, 3mm paint pens. Okay, now everything is looking in this scene after I colored it. There's pretty decent, you know, rich color schemes going about, but it's all kind of soft and muddled, okay? Going in now with some paint pens, I'm adding these little dots, and they're kind of crisp little dots. You know, it's just a paint dot. It's an acrylic paint pen. So I'm going in and I'm adding it into those trees, and that is giving the trees a little bit of a kind of a definition, and it gives them a little bit of a shimmer, and isn't quite so, I don't know, that whole area isn't quite so muddled looking now, okay? And the good thing about paint pens these days is that they come in all kinds of different colors and values of colors, okay? Light, medium, dark. So you can use them in scenes like this. Even though I never used to use the 3mm ones. I thought, what am I ever going to do with those? Those are too big. So I always kind of went for the 0.7mm, which I love, okay? But these big, bold kind of dots like that are really, I don't know, they're really fun to use. It's almost like we're doing a little bit of a stamp impressionism or something like that, or pointillism, you might call it. Okay, going in with some black ink to add a little bit more shading and tone to some areas. The black, since I stamped out a lot of the objects in black, it's a good overall kind of a blending color to add in at the end. But you don't want a big, you know, bold application of that black. I'm just kind of adding a little bit of a kind of grayish tinge at any given time. So if I want it darker, then I keep going over it. But don't go into it with like a super sopping wet applicator of black and then just get this big kind of obscene kind of application of black, okay? Do it where it's like think of it like you're dry brushing that ink in there, okay? So see those little kind of shadows starting to develop a little bit more? Okay, now I have a lot more work to do with my paint pens, okay? So I do some paint pen work with kind of a pale violet, pink, and white in those pink trees. And I use a lot of the white on the clouds and kind of down in the grass area as well. See, that's kind of like bringing everything to life a little bit. It's kind of like crawling with little dots, you know, but we'll smooth it all out with some white pigment ink, okay? So it's like, I don't know, you might think of it like working from thin inks to thicker inks like this, but I do go back. You know, you can add in some additional dye-based inks, or it's like if you add in these acrylic dots in here, it's not like you can't go back and add in some more alcohol pen work or colored pencils or something like that, okay? It's not kind of a situation, you know, where there's a point of no return. All right, so here's some smaller paint pens. I was just kind of describing to people the different types of media out there that's available to you. Adding in some more detailed work right here. Okay, these little detailed touches are going in there with the 0.7mm paint pens. 0.7mm have, the extra fine tips have a kind of a more extensive range of colors, I find. All right, now this is going back to the 3mm, kind of a tan color pen, adding it down there into the road. It stands out a little bit too much, so you'll see what I do later on and how I blend that all out. Okay, this is a white 3mm paint pen, very bold, and it's going to leave kind of the whitest dot. Naturally, it's white, but it can be a little bit too white at times, which is why I'll utilize the white pigment ink afterwards to blend that in. Okay. All right, now I'm adding it on some of the lighter areas of the clouds, some of the lighter areas of the trees, like that. But having these little crisp little elements in this scene, it's really bringing it together and kind of giving the scene a nice full range of kind of soft and sharp imagery in here, okay? Or elements, I should say. But that being said, I was thinking about the fences in here. The fences really go well with the covered bridge. I mean, they go real well with just about anything. They're great visual lead-ins, as I call them, in a scene, okay? So I'm just using a small portion of one of them right here. And while I was doing this, I thought this was the only fence I was going to use, but I have kind of the opposite side fences, and I have them in two different sizes, so I thought the smaller right-hand side could fit right there. And it's only using about half of the image. And now here's my thing that I wasn't quite sure about, but I thought, oh, let's just do it. Embossing, okay? So I have those embossed fences down there. And what they will be is they will both be dark and raised. They'll actually be three-dimensional, so you know, they should be really kind of it's a fun little twist to add into your scene, having something actually raised. And I don't know, my thoughts are the things that you raise might be the things that are the closest to you. So it looks really three-dimensional. Okay, now those are the only really solid black, bold images in here. So I take my Tiny Rocks small stamp and I stamp out some black texture into the road, okay? Just so it matches a little bit more the fence area. So see those black little dots down there? I mean, they're kind of something fairly insignificant, but from a value perspective, they really add in. Okay, here's what we want to do here with the white pigment ink, okay? Areas that I've retained some white of the paper, that represents kind of the light hitting that area, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm adding in some of this white pigment ink into those illuminated areas and just kind of extending out in a very soft manner that illumination, okay? Now it's really, really important that you get the consistency of the white pigment ink on the cotton ball correct. And it's really easy to do. You just have to remove a lot of the ink before you go and take it onto your scene. You want to kind of test out how much is on there first, you know. If you haven't done this before, blot it off on a piece of dark paper or something like that, just to see how loaded your cotton ball is with white pigment ink. I'm going for a soft, kind of real billowy, airy, thin fog type of application, so you don't want a cotton ball loaded up with, you know, a slathering of white ink, and that's something that a lot of people do, okay? I have to be careful about not doing that. Like right after I re-ink my white pad, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm applying like a big blob. But look how airy and light that background looks, and look how illuminated this whole scene looks. Look at this, I'm even putting it a little bit on a part of the fence, so it looks like there's some fog in the foreground like that. See that? How that kind of fog kind of brings everything together. The bridges didn't seem like they were like an integral part of the landscape here. So what I've done is I put a little bit of that kind of mist in front of them, so it kind of envelops those bridges in a texture that is running throughout the scene, bringing it all together, okay? All right, so here's some more branches here, stamped in the VersaFine Clear, a very, very dark color, which will dry. Okay, I just changed my exposure to kind of something, you know, that's about the right color for that scene. Okay, stamping out my flock up there, or my gulls, not flock. Flock is a different stamp. And that kind of has some birds going up into the sky like that. Now, I decided, oh, let's just go ahead and emboss these. I embossed those fences. Why not do the leaves here? All right, and you can see those fun with embossing. Look how those leaves really kind of pop out at you. It looks really quite three-dimensional. And having some leaves on the left and right side like that, it kind of frames off that lower section of the scene really well. It's like, you know, there's a tree kind of off to the each side, kind of going into the scene. All right, some final touches with the white, extra fine white paint pen. Adding little details. Now watch what I do on this, on the fences here. Even though those fences are raised, and they do kind of capture the light already, but just putting on a little bit of extra highlighting on the top rungs like that, or on the rungs. You can do it on the post too, but see that little bit of white like that? Look how three-dimensional that fence looks now. Okay, you can add, some highlights on, some of the other branches. I'm bringing out that fence in the background by the covered bridge a little bit more. All right. So we have our crisp against kind of soft in there, with the foreground branches, the fence down there at the bottom. All right, formatting my card like this. I just have a little bit of a white border like that and that dark, kind of dark glossy. And going in here, when that white pigment dries, it gets a little bit more transparent and dark. So you can add in another layer of some white, but look how airy and light that looks up there with the use of the white pigment ink. White pigment ink is your friend. Anyway, there's the scene right there. This is a much shorter version of the, the live stream. I need to quit torturing people with like Lord of the Rings extended version, length videos or live streams and start doing some smaller applications of the stamps. But I enjoy talking with people so much, I just kind of get blabbing and kind of lose the time, and it's, it makes for a really long scene. So anyways, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.